I will be your entertainer for the coming lectures on parallel algorithms. As you might know, this is part 2 of a course on parallel architectures and parallel algorithms. Together with this course, there is also a lab course, and well, maybe you have read the email and you know that this course, although it's scheduled for Thursday, you are free to do it on your own. If you need some devices that will make available, then these will be made available during these hours. But it is not strictly forbidden to do it on your own machine if you have the capabilities to do so. Let me first start with this course by introducing to you a few topics that I would like to discuss in this first lecture. First of all, I would like to tell you something about the contents of the course. So, what about the lectures? What's the content of the lectures? How is the exam? And what is the content of the lab course? What's the organization about it? Then what with respect to the aims, what would I like to teach you during this course? And this has to do with the methodology that we will follow here. We will try to make it clear that designing parallel algorithms is not something that has to do with specializing a serial algorithm and to make it suitable for executing on a parallel architecture. No, it means that you have to design from the start following special principles a parallel algorithm that in some sense is optimal. Then we will introduce to you a special paradigm, and that's, well, the most well-known paradigm for designing parallel algorithms, the so-called work time paradigm. It's a very high-level paradigm to make it clear what these design principles are for constructing parallel algorithms. And then during this lecture, we will start by giving you an introduction to some basic techniques for designing parallel algorithms, and the first of them you already might be acquainted with is the balanced tree method. Okay, so that's in a nutshell the contents of this course, this lecture, sorry. So let's start with the organization. So what about the lectures? What will be the content of the lectures? Well, today we will start with introducing to you the algorithmic design of parallel algorithms. Then we will continue with an overview of basic techniques. And the teaching material consists of slides and copies of a book that currently is no longer in press, but we made copies available of the main chapters that we will discuss. Here are these copies, and you are requested to take one of the first part and one of the second part to use them along the slides to get an idea about what this course is about. Okay, then we will continue after discussing these basic techniques with linear recurrences and matrix algebra, so the main parallel algorithm and algorithms that are associated with manipulating objects in linear algebra, and this will also be a main ingredient of the exercises you have to solve during this lab course. Then we will discuss some sorting techniques and give you an overview of parallel sorting techniques, and if time permits, then we also will discuss some graph algorithms for manipulating graphs and finding out what the parallel variants of quite famous serial graph operation techniques are. Okay, so this is an overview of the lectures, and again we will use as teaching material the slides, the copies of this book Jaja that are available here in front of this room, and I also will make some references to Grammar, which is the main book you already have in your possession, I believe. Okay. So, what about the lab course? Basically, there will be 3 assignments you have to complete. You have to complete them on your own. And there is a manual available for the lab course that you can obtain via the Blackboard site. And as everyone might know, you have to write an email, to send an email to Jay Shen, who is the coordinator of the lab course, and she will send you some instructions about which exercise to complete and what about the feedback that you should receive after submitting your solution to the exercise. So, is that clear to everyone? Did already everyone send an email to? So if you didn't, then please do it as soon as possible. Then she can make the preparations for making the assignments. Okay. Then we will have an examination of this course, as you might know, and you already completed, of course, part 1, hopefully. This part will be examined separately. You will receive a mark for it, and the final grade for the course is an average of these 2 marks. There will be a resit of part 1 and part 2, of course, if you don't make it the first time. And the lab course will be completed separately. Okay. So far? Okay. Questions, maybe? So, what is the aim of part 2? As I told you already, it's not about making serial algorithms somehow faster by making them suitable for executing on a parallel architecture. It is basically about designing parallel algorithms. And then we have a problem because you would like to design a concrete algorithm for a concrete architecture. But there are, as you know from part 1, several of those architectures. And now you might have a problem because if you design your nice method for one specific architecture, it might cost you quite some effort to redesign it to be suitable for another architecture. So you would like to avoid it. You would like to start top-down. You would like to design, to have a technique that you can implement on special architectures by specializing your algorithm. And that's what this part of the course is about. We would like to deal with very general algorithmic techniques for designing parallel algorithms that afterwards we can specialize to the architecture at hand. So we would like to abstract from special properties of these parallel architectures. We would like to be as general as possible. And afterwards, we would like to tailor these general algorithms we have developed to the special architecture at hand. So, what we will do is we would like to present you with a very general framework, both for developing, presenting, and analyzing parallel algorithms. So that's the basic idea of this course. We would like to teach you how you could design algorithms, and we will provide you with some tools, these basic techniques, these techniques for analyzing linear recurrences, these techniques for manipulating objects in linear algebra and so on. And then we would like to give you also tools for presenting these algorithms in a nice way. Why? Well, the way in which we will present these algorithms enables us to analyze them. And this analysis is very important because we would like to compare different algorithms and different techniques in order to make up our mind about which one is better than another. Okay, so we would like to do with the problem how to design suitable parallel algorithms, and that, well, I hope that at the end of this course to everyone it's clear that designing a parallel algorithm is something completely different from designing a serial algorithm. Although you might know some of these optimal techniques for designing algorithms for special problems suitable for serial computers, the algorithm designed for a parallel machine might be completely different. Yes? You have to design it in some cases in a completely new way. Then we would like to deal with the presentation of this general idea and the algorithm, and then we would like to analyze this algorithm in a machine-independent way, such that, completely abstracting from the special architecture, we can make some general statements about which algorithm is better than another. Okay. To do so, we first need, of course, a very general model for describing, so for presentation and analysis of these parallel algorithms. And there are a few requirements, of course, we need. If you would like to have a tool to guide your intuition about some algorithms, it should be, of course, very simple and general, but not too general. It would not be that highbrow that we are dealing with special architectures or general architectures that are not implementable at all. So we require it to be both simple and implementable. Then there are a number of choices we could consider. For example, you have flow models based on DAGs, directed acyclic graphs, very popular in some environments. We have the shared memory model and we have the network models. But what we are choosing is the shared memory, or the PRAM model. Because it has a long tradition, it's quite general, and it's quite suitable for specializing to specific architectures. Now, what is this PRAM model? Well, I assume that this should be known to everyone. What we have is a number of processors, each having a local memory and a shared global memory, and they are operating in a synchronous operation mode. There is no direct communication between the processors, only via this global shared memory, and we can distinguish several modes for accessing this global shared memory. So this is the global PRAM model that we will use to develop our parallel algorithms. This sounds familiar to you? Yeah, the distinction between the, okay, so we do not need to make a distinction between them. What we will need effectively is only here, well, sometimes I will ask you to design an algorithm that is based on the EREU, but normally we'll base ourselves on the CREW variety, and I will also address here the CRCW, where we have three varieties that sometimes play an important role in making distinction between algorithms. We have the common variety, where you only can write to the global memory if the processes that are active to write use a common value, and so there is no disagreement between the values that are written to the shared memory. We have an arbitrary model where an arbitrary processor is used to write, to be granted to write to the shared memory processor. So this is a special conflict resolution rule based on an arbitrary selection, and we have the priority rule where the processors are assigned priorities, and the highest processor active to write is granted access to the common memory. And we will analyze some of these algorithms using these rules. For the moment, we will omit details concerning the memory access because we want to deal with a very general way of analyzing and building algorithms. So, well, I mentioned a few times already this work-time paradigm. What is this work-time paradigm that we would like to use? Well, it's quite simple. It describes a PRAM algorithm on two levels. And the first level is the most abstract, and the second level deals with more implementation details. At the top level, we have a so-called work-time presentation of an algorithm, where you have a specification of an algorithm in terms of a program that consists of a sequence, so a linear ordered sequence of concurrent operations. Okay? So we assume that you can write an algorithm as a sequence of steps, and in each step you can do something concurrent. So concurrency is encapsulated in these sets. Why? Well, it makes it far more convenient to analyze the time and work complexity of algorithms, and that we need in order to compare our algorithms. What's important is that the details about the implementation are completely invisible. So you don't have to bother about the number of processes. You assume simply that there are enough of them. You don't have to do with any of these nasty allocation issues, and you don't have to do about details of memory access operations. But then, when you have designed your algorithm completely free of these implementation details, then you can specialize your algorithm to the architecture at hand. So, first of all, you can assume that there is not an unbounded number of processes, but you have to do with a fixed amount of processes. Well, how to specialize your algorithm to a fixed amount of processes? And we will provide you with some methods that ensure that you can check that your algorithm specialized to a fixed amount of processes is still optimal if your original, very general algorithm is optimal. That you don't lose efficiency by specializing your algorithm, that you did the best you can. Okay, and then, if you would like to do so, we can also deal with the additional elements of processor allocation and communication details. But, well, for the most part, for quite a large part of this course, we don't even bother about this, because the main message of this course is there are very general techniques you can apply to design parallel algorithms, and most of the work that is done to specialize your general algorithm to specific architectures, well, that's taken over by specialized software. That's not the main problem. Yes?
In the case of the low level, this be like a certain value, or would it be for, that you show that for any P?
Both. So, if you give me a fixed number of processes, let's say 200 or 300, I can give you the resulting, the algorithm that results whenever you specialize your algorithm to that architecture. but I can also deal with p as a variable. So I simply assume that p is constant, and then we can compute with p. So we can make some assertions saying that, for example, if you take p too low, then the complexity of your algorithm will raise enormously. We will also deal with, well, let's say, the formulas that pertain to a number of processes that's ideally for a kind of algorithm that we just developed. Okay. Yeah? Questions? Okay. So remember, well, you are free to ask questions before the examination. And if you don't ask questions, then I simply continue. So if you don't understand me anymore, then please raise your hand and let me explain it to you another time. And that, until now, that's free. Okay, so let me give you a concrete example of what I mean by a presentation, a work time presentation of the algorithm. I told you we will use programs as sequences of steps, and in each step you can perform some concurrent operation. Well, the time of, sorry, if we would like to analyze the complexity of such a program or algorithm, we need two metrics. And I will make you clear in a moment what the importance of taking these two metrics is. The first metric is parallel time, and that's expressed by this T of n. And n, of course, is a measure for the size of the input. And we are, of course, used to consider complexity of an object measured as a function that's dependent upon the size of the input. Now, what's Tn? That's the number of time steps. So this is the sequence of time steps. If you have a sequence of 10 time steps, then here Tn would be 10. Yeah. And that corresponds to this measure, this metric Tp, also used by grammar. Then we have the amount of work, and that's Wn. And Wn is the amount of operations performed, the total number of operations. And well, and that makes sense, because now we have parallel time, and here we have a metric that pertains to the total number of operations performed. Well, the total number of operations has something to do with the sequential time that needs to pass. So, by giving these two metrics, you can see, first of all, what parallelization of an algorithm brings you. Because here the ratio between Tn and Wn tells you how much the influence of parallelization is on the performance of your algorithm. But this Wn is also important if you would like to compare your algorithm with the best serial algorithm that there is. Because you never know, when executing your parallel algorithm, how many processes will effectively be used during the execution. Now, it might be that in some cases, due to failures, for example, you end up with a very small number of processes that effectively can be used during the execution of your parallel algorithm. Now, if you have a very fast parallel algorithm where Tn is very low, but Wn is much higher than the best sequential algorithm that you would have, then under these circumstances that you can effectively use quite a few processes, your algorithm might be worse than a serial algorithm. So what we would try to do is we would try to develop parallel algorithms where we keep this Wn competitive with respect to a serial algorithm. So we would like to use parallel algorithms where Wn is equal to the best time complexity of a serial algorithm that we know. Yeah? And then, well, we are free to use our parallel algorithm because, well, if there are very few processes, then okay, let it be so. We never lose with respect to a sequential algorithm. We can only gain if there are enough processes around. So, what ways are there to express a concurrency? Well, the basic statement we will use for concurrency is a very simple one, and it is for j between I and k par do and a certain statement. And that means that statements corresponding to the values of j between I and k are executed concurrently. So for all these values of j, what follows here is done with the complexity that's equivalent to the complexity of this statement. Okay. Let me give you a very simple example. But I think that most of you already saw this example in parts. Suppose I have an array of values and I would like to determine the maximum. Yeah. And for simplicity, I take here n as a power of 2. Yeah. So n is 2 to the power 2. The idea is the following. We would like to compute it in a non-destructive way. So we would like to have a variable, this array A, with original values, and we would like to use this, a separate value for obtaining the maximum without destroying the array A. So what we do first is we would like to copy A in a second array B. Yeah? Then we take pairwise comparisons between adjacent elements in B and we store them again in the first half of B. Yeah? So here the first two are stored in 1 and then this number 3 and 4 are stored in B2 and here we have Bn divided by 2 and this contains the maximum of the last two methods. Yeah? When you have these maximums, you perform the same game again. You take the maximum of the adjacent elements and you continue until you achieve here only one value, and that's B1. Now, how many, if you consider this as a kind of tree, how many layers does this tree have? Well, originally we started with n elements, then by halving we arrive at the top element. Well, how many times can you halve an array containing n elements? That's of course log n times. Yeah? So log n of these operations, the maximum operation, and then you are there. Now the basic idea of course is that, well, this copying phase and this deciding about which of the two elements is the maximum, we would like to do in parallel, and of course these layers we would like to build in a serial. So what will be the format of presentation of our algorithm? And this is the first example of this idea of having a sequence of time steps where in each of these time steps you can perform operations concurrently. We start here with the first statement, the first time step. For I between 1 and n, par do bi becomes ai. This is the copying step. Then in the second time step, we perform here a serial for loop. For h is 1 to log n. So that's building up the tree. Yeah? At each level of the tree, well, you do the following. At the jth level, you have n divided by 2 to the power h of these array elements, where you have pairwise, you have to do pairwise comparisons. Yeah? So that means that if b2j is at least as large as b2j minus 1, then of course b2j wins and bj becomes b2j, and else bj becomes b2j minus 1. minus 1. So this is the end of the second time step, and here finally we have the third time step, and there you copy the result, and that's the content of the root of the tree, so to say, that you have found into max. Okay, so what's now the idea? Well, in analyzing now this algorithm, we have a very nice scheme, because we can concentrate on each of these time steps. And for each time step, we can make a complexity analysis. And since the number of time steps here that we make, we know from beforehand, we can easily compute the resulting complexity. So here, in time step number 1, we have to compare, or we have to take 2 of these metrics. So we have to compute the parallel time, and we have to compute the work complexity. Well, what is the parallel time? That's t is 01, because you have to perform one statement here concurrently, for let's say n processes. And what's the total amount of work? Well, consider this statement as an ordinary sequential statement, then you have to perform n copy operations. So this is don't do so. Then we have to do with the second time step, and the second time step you see that here we have a sequential for loop, and in this sequential for loop we have an additional parallel for loop to execute. Now we have to compute the time and work complexity for this for loop. Well, that's quite easy, because if you concentrate on this statement, you see that this statement requires, every statement requires a constant number of operations, so can be performed in O1. Yeah? So what's the total time complexity of this for loop? The time complexity is still O1, because all these statements are performed concurrently. Yeah? So we have O1 time complexity, and well, for the serial complexity, you see that these statements are executed and divided by 2 to the power h times. So the work complexity is O n divided by 2 to the power h. Okay, now what about here the time complexity of this statement? What's the time complexity? So here we have, in the body of this for loop, we know that the time complexity is O1 for executing this parallel for loop. Yeah? How many times? Yes?
The previous time complexity only holds if you have in the order of n processes per time.
Yeah, but but that's very convenient for me, because I don't have to bother about these processes. I simply assume that they are enough. Yeah?
Log n.
Log n. Why?
Because the small part is happening O1, but it's not happening log n times the sequential. So.
Excellent. Yes, indeed. So the time complexity is O log n, and the work complexity is O n. Okay, you are brilliant. No questions about that? Everyone agrees that the work complexity here is O n? Why? Why is the work complexity O n? You can give me 2 reasons. There is one formal reason and there is an informal reason. And this informal reason is far more important, and it has to do with your intuition. Yes?
I think because the small part is work complexity is n divided by 2 to the power h.
Yeah.
And the amount of levels you have is log n. And then you put that in the h, you will get your magic formula on top of it.
Okay, that's the formal reason, so let's do that. So here's the final. Here. This is your reason. So it's the sigma of h is 1 to log n of n divided by 2 to the power h. Yeah? That's n times sigma h is 1 to until log n of 1 divided by 2 to the power h. Yeah? And that's of course O n because this series converges to, what is it? A constant. Yeah? Okay. That's the formal part. But it is a much more easier part. Look back to this this idea. Sorry. Here I have the tree. This tree ends up with one node. Yeah, B node. Every node here in this tree I can charge some time. Yeah? To perform the operation of taking the maximum. Every node in this tree, you should agree with me, has to do a constant amount of work, a constant amount of operations. Yeah? Either it is the result of a copy operation for the lowest level, or it is the result here, this node, for example, takes two nodes here on the lower level, takes the maximum and stores it here in its node. Yeah? And then the second, then this node takes over, etc. So every node in this tree has to do a constant amount of operations. How many nodes are there in this tree? If you have an array of n, and n is here, is 2 to the power k, how many nodes are there in this tree? 2n minus 1. So 2 times n minus 1. That's simple. Take n, then add n divided by 2, add n divided by 4, add n, etc. until 1. And you end up with the total sum of 2 times n minus 1. Now all these nodes have to perform a constant number of operations. So what is the total complexity of performing all the operations? That of course is O(n) times the O of constant. And that's O(n). So that's the second way of considering. Charge all the operations to the nodes that are performing these operations, and you see that the total number of operations, total number of nodes is O(n). Total number of operations per node is constant, and that makes a total of O(n) as the resulting complexity. So that was one way, and the second way was a more formal one, that you simply take the sum, and like I told you, the sum of n divided by 2 to the power h, for h is 1 to log n, and then by computing the sum of a converging series, you also end up in O. So this is the O of n, TO log n. Then finally we have O1, O1. And now you have to compute the final complexity. Well, if you have a constant number of here time steps, then it's very easy to compute the final complexity. Because if you have a constant number, you have only to take care for the maximum of these W's and for the maximum of these T's to determine the resulting complexity. Well, the maximum of these work complexities is O(n), and the maximum of these time complexities is log n. Okay? So the resulting work complexity of this algorithm is O(n), and the time complexity is log n. Well, we can say something already before the break about this algorithm. I know, and that should be easy to you too, that every sequential algorithm will cost you at least O(n) algorithms to compute the maximum. Yeah. So this algorithm, in a certain sense, if you compare it with the serial algorithm, is optimal. Yeah? You can't do better. If you take its parallel time, so if you have enough processes, then you see here the speed up. But So doing it in parallel, we can reduce the time we need from n to log n, and that's a significant speed up. So this algorithm is, well, some algorithm that we would like to use, because compared to a serial one, we achieve a speed up. Can we do better? What do you think? Can we do better? So can I compute the maximum in a much less time than log n? Yes?
I'm not sure if it would be faster, but maybe evaluate more numbers on one processor.
Yeah. Well, the basic answer is I need indeed a special PRAM architecture. So, for example, think about it before we take the break. If I use a CRCW and I use a much larger number of processes, I can compute my maximum in constant time. In one time, I can compute the maximum. But this algorithm is a very dangerous one because it takes a quadratic number of processes. And that might mean that if I perform my algorithm in an environment where much less processes are available, then I will end up with an execution time that's much larger than this maximum. Yeah. Okay, but that's after the break. So let's reconvene in 12 minutes.